Now, when it comes to deciding whether or not you want to start a family and have some children, the fact is most people don't. At least 50% of US pregnancies are unplanned. But if you aren't in that group, then one of the biggest considerations you'll have to, consider is finances. Children are expensive. Just having a single child is going to cost you at least $250,000, but more accurately, much more likely, it's going to cost you at least $500,000. Because when we look at the price of things like basic necessities over the first 17, 18 years of life, we see that it is going to add up. And this is only the basic stuff. And this is also assuming that they actually do move out when they reach that 18 years of age. But these things obviously are changing. Children are deciding to live at home longer and well into their adult life. So I'm just saying, if you want to have some money, if you want to be able to save money, if you don't want to wind up being poor, then you should definitely consider contraceptives. Maybe having children isn't going to work out for you. The fact is, childless couples do tend to have a higher standard of living because instead of having to spend all their money on their child, they're able to save it and buy nicer things and have a higher standard of living. And this also leads to a greater marital satisfaction, which is something I talked about before when I was describing how children ruin marriages. But that was in a previous video. Regarding childless couples, generally society has seen them as selfish, seen them pretty negatively in that regard, but times have changed. People are starting to accept the idea of long-term marriage and commitment without children. Things have been improving ever since the 1970s. But if you do start a family, if you do decide to start having children, and you live in the United States, then you're probably going to have what we call a nuclear family. Now, we don't call it nuclear because it has anything to do with radiation or anything like that. We call it nuclear because the nucleus is like the core. It's like the center. It's the smallest part. You can't break down that nucleus anymore. So this is the core family. It consists of only the parents and the children. But what we see more common in non-Western societies is the extended family being the norm. So extended families have, that nucleus, the parents and the children, but then they also have a larger social group, including grandparents and uncles and cousins and so on. So much larger family living in one home. And this works out for a lot of these other cultures for various reasons. Obviously, when you have more people in the home, you have more people that you can, depend upon. More people that can look out for you. More people that can help you when you're in trouble or when you're in a time of need. So extended families have worked very well throughout history worldwide. It's just in the United States and in similar countries like the United States, the nuclear family's been the norm. But times are changing. I'm pretty sure in the near future, this is going to be phased out. And just in our country in particular, one particular group that we see the extended family especially popular in are Latino families. So if you come from a Latino background, you know what I'm talking about. But as I keep saying, times are definitely changing. Couples are to a much higher rate than before deciding not to have children, and if they do decide to have children, they're waiting longer and longer than they would have before. A lot of couples are waiting so long that they can't really even conceive a child anymore, and they have to get special treatments or consider adopting a child because their body is just, not capable of reproduction at this point. You especially see this kind of problem amongst the more educated, the more financially stable. And these older parents, if they do have children, either through adoption or they get the medical assistance that they need, they do tend to be much more supportive, much more at ease, much more affectionate and sensitive. They use a much more authoritative and potentially permissive parenting style. But for the most part, when people do have kids, the home is going to be a bit stressful. More than 70% of women with children are employed outside the home nowadays. And they still are expected to perform a lot of those traditional child-rearing tasks because we still have a lot of those traditional cultural, holdovers from old times when women weren't allowed to be in the workplace. So while I keep saying times are changing, we still have a lot of room to grow. We still have a lot of changes that we need to see before things are going to get better. Now, on the subject of extended families, there's a phrase that has gotten a lot of scientific support. It takes a village to raise a child. I don't know if you've ever heard that phrase. But this is actually a very accurate phrase. And when we look through history, we see different parenting styles being used. Like historically, Native Americans would share everything they had. They would share their land, they would share their food, they would share their tools, they would also share their spouses and their children. And by sharing everything they have in this way, they're effectively creating one massive family. The entire tribe is your family. And myself, I'm the parent of 2 small children, and this sounds incredibly wonderful to me. Like just the thought of, oh, I need to go to the store to buy something. I'll just take my children to my neighbor's house and leave them there. Like that sounds great. I wish we could do that. I wish we had that kind of social structure in our country. But that's just not how it is. We have this focus on the nuclear family, unfortunately. But yeah, there's definitely an appeal to this Native American style where no individual adult was given the full burden of raising a child. And this also resulted in much stronger communities because, like I said, you had a mom and dad, but you kind of had a whole range of moms and dads. You could go anywhere and you could see your family virtually. So this is related to something that we call familism. So familism is a specific term referring to when the family's well-being takes precedence over individual concerns, individual family members' concerns. So we saw this in a lot of Native American communities. We see this as like a defining characteristic in Latino communities and many others. But these are the places that you can most clearly see familism take place. So if you do come from that kind of background, just think back to various times during your childhood where you may have actually been literally told, we understand you're having a problem. We understand you're having some issue, but you need to think about your family first. Your family is more important than you, the individual. They probably didn't say it exactly like that, but along those lines. Now, the complete opposite of having this entire tribe be your family is that of single parents. Single parents are unfortunately kind of common in our country. Over 40% of all U.S. births are to unwed mothers, and in a lot of those cases, the father's just not going to stick around. Out of wedlock births comprise about 70% of African American births, 50% of Latino births, and 30% of European American births. And the causes of being a single parent include things like a higher divorce rate, so people who have children when they're very young, they tend to have a higher divorce rate. The decision to keep out of wedlock children, and just higher fertility rates. Now, what a lot of individuals, especially older couples that are having trouble conceiving a child, what a lot of individuals are doing is considering adopting a child. So about 1/3 of North American couples do become step, foster, or adoptive parents. And when you are the parent of a child that's not biologically related to you, then it makes sense that you would be concerned about how well you're connecting with this child, how strong your bond is with this child. So these individuals do typically have to work a bit harder, or at least they feel more pressure. Foster parents in particular tend to have the most difficulty in developing and maintaining bonds with their foster kids. And when it comes to the subject of same-sex parenting, like if a same-sex couple adopts a child, for example, typically society has held a lot of homophobic beliefs, and one of the common ones in this regard is that they're going to turn the kid gay. But the research clearly shows that's not how this works. That's so ridiculously not how this works. In fact, kids of same-sex parents tend to do better because those same-sex parents tend to have less conflict, less violence, less abuse, and the kids benefit from this more harmonious home life that they tend to experience. So homosexual parents tend to be better in some cases than heterosexual.